Hey friends, this is Waylon, and today I have a wonderful guest for you. She's a returning guest. The only people who ever return are our favorite and your favorite crowd favorites, fan favorites. So today we're going to talk about the Eastern or Lunar New Year, sometimes called the Chinese New Year, Tibetan New Year. That is coming right up. And we have an expert on that, on what year it is, on what that means, what element, what animal. There's 12 animals. There's, I think, 4 elements. And here she is. So without further ado. Hey, you.
Hey, Waylon.
Can you see and hear everything's fine?
Yeah. My head is so big compared to yours, though.
Well, that's just because of all the rave reviews for your new book.
So, I heard your little introduction. I'm so honored to be a repeat visitor.
It's so rare, but I feel like, have we only done one video?
No, we've done 2.
Yeah, I
We
feel
also
like
did.
it's just so fun. But Angie, do you have your book with you? You got to show off your book. So, Mindful Homes is a beautiful book. You sent me a copy. Thank you so much. And before we get into the Lunar New Year, Eastern New Year, what is your book about, and who is it for?
Thank you for asking. So my book is a book about Feng Shui, but from a mindfulness perspective, because I'm a Buddhist and a mindfulness meditator, and so the way that I see Feng Shui is through the lens of from mindfulness. It's a mindfulness practice. So I really speak about looking at your home in that way with gentleness and curiosity, and seeing how we're interconnected and interdependent with our spaces.
Okay. So on that note, before we get into the New Year, I think you already know because I told Molly to tell you. The last time we did a live tour of my fabulous, creative, messy home.
Yeah.
And when we were in the mud room, I don't know if we want to. Do you remember this?
Yes.
Do you want to?
We went into the back mud room, which is in your relationship area, and then you told me you would invite me to the wedding.
Oh, I did?
Uh-huh.
Well, so I think I was single when we did that video. I had been engaged during COVID. I was heartbroken. I was really sad. My old dog died. And then my mudroom is, as it sounds like, where a lot of traffic comes in and out of the house. Boxes wind up being there. Paint, any home projects are all on the stairs going down to the basement. Laundry, dog, the dog food stuff. So it's just like the groceries. So it's like the most crowded room in my house. Shoes. I mean, it's endless. And we'll have to do another live tour post Angie blessing and enlightening everything, because my whole mudroom is so clean and empty and beautiful right now.
Wonderful. And
oh, and I met a wonderful lady who's I don't know how to describe it without getting all honeymoony, but
oh, I'm so happy.
Yeah, a lot of like emotional intelligence, good communication, kind of the things I was looking for, and getting more and more sure kind of wouldn't exist, for at least for me. And I want children and all that. She's a single mom, and anyway, it's been amazing. And the mudroom, I didn't clean it up because you told me about relationships. I'm not that smart. What you said stuck in my head, and I just always looked at it being the center of all the coming and goings of my life. And I think it just, more than it being a conscious decision, it just, over time, I just kept pushing it in that direction, even to the point of washing out the rugs and everything. So that's the effect of Angie, people, on your life.
But then you said you forgot you were going to invite me to your wedding.
I'm one of my nicknames is Goldfish. You know how goldfish go around the tank and they forget they saw the treasure chest before every 3 minutes? But I'm not only forgetful, but a man of my word. So yeah, if we get there, you will be invited. That would be amazing if you would want to come.
Okay, all right. Well, that makes me so happy, and I think that speaks a lot to just the power of feng shui, that like it doesn't necessarily need to be X plus Y equals Z, but that you made a change in a place in your life that had some importance, and that created space for you to meet somebody eventually.
I also, to give you more credit, I think of a mudroom, coming from Vermont where mudrooms are a thing, as a place where you dump your bags and your boots and your coats and
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't really been troubled by it being so crowded before. It wasn't pleasant. I didn't like it, but I hadn't thought about it in that way. And it took talking with you and also showing, I think I showed you and the audience live, like what it looked like to like really have that. So anyway, not only would you be invited to the wedding, if you came, you would probably have to give a toast talking about this.
I will.
Uh,
I will. Um, that's really what a heartwarming story, though, and also, that's a big thing because so many people are lonely in this world, and that you're really giving a lot of people hope to find ways, not just like the practical ways, but the heartfelt and the invisible ways to move things around, because so many people do all the other right things, like
mm-hmm.
they go online and you know they they try to lose weight, whatever they think is the right thing to do to meet someone, and sometimes it's that secret or non-doing way that can open up
Yeah,
space.
there's something stuck or unseen,
Mm-hmm.
and the that's the obstacle. So now that we've kind of jumped into it a bit, can you remind all of us what is feng shui? And when you say mindful feng shui, what is that distinction?
So feng shui is a practice in which you look at your environment and begin to see how you're connected to it and how it may help you or create obstacles in your life. So it also looks at the flow of Shui, which is energy in a space. And I also like to define feng shui as a mindfulness practice, as paying attention to the details of your
Mm,
environment, because we could so often disregard it. Like recently, I just taught a class for Shambhala
mm.
LA, and I'm teaching one on Shambhala online this weekend. And
Oh, you send that link to me if you think of it.
okay,
Yeah.
I will. And um, I realized something which I hadn't really thought of like as a directly, but a lot of people look at their home with shame, like one does like with their body. Like, because people were like, someone asked like, why did you pick that picture of like like this like nice console with frames on the wall? And I think she had a lot of shame around whatever her home looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, of course, like, when we when we set up a plate of food for someone, we want to make it nice. If we want to set up our home, anyway, there's a lot of shame around our home. I'm getting off the
No,
topic.
I
So
love that. I have three quotes for you that I think you'll love.
okay.
One, two are by Trungpa Rinpoche, and so you may know them. One, which is exactly what you're saying, is elegance allows no resentment. And Trungpa Rinpoche's notion of elegance wasn't fancy, although it could be, but it didn't have to be. It just meant kind of like what happened with the mudroom, just um, awake and simple. Allows no resentment, meaning it doesn't trigger all of this sort of neurosis or unseen
Yes.
obstacles. And then the other one is uh, um, God, we have an article on it. It's something like if you pay attention to the details in your world with a healthy, and you have a healthy sense of disrespect for the rules laid around you, there will be success. It's a very Trungpa Rinpoche quote.
Yeah,
But just what you said, paying attention to the details of your world or of your space or of your body or of your mind.
exactly.
And then the third one is an ancient, I think it's um, an ancient Chinese quote, but it's something about ruling. And, from Trungpa Rinpoche's perspective, all of us are rulers of our own
Mm-hmm.
world. and it's like he or she who treats the world as their body or their body as the world can be trusted to rule. So
Yeah.
anyway, I thought you might enjoy those. Those are for you.
Yeah, and it's true because there's some if we can bring some dignity to our home, which doesn't mean it has to be Pinterest perfect, but also
Right.
but like take the time to like wash our face in the morning, to brush our teeth, to wipe down the counter before or wipe, beautifully plate our piece of
Mm-hmm.
toast instead of standing at the sink eating it. Like little things like that bring more elegance, more dignity, and more care and enjoyment to everything that we do. So that's kind of my perspective on feng shui.
I love that
And
because
mhm.
oh, sorry, it's breaking up. Didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's okay. It was breaking up, so
Well, I
keep going.
love making cinnamon raisin toast in the toaster and then I have my little vegan butter, I put that on it. And the difference between when I'm like rushing around or being mindless and eating it while doing other stuff or putting it on a beautiful little antique china plate with, and spreading it
Mhm.
nicely, the difference isn't, you know, 10 or 20%. The difference is literally I enjoy the piece of toast. It's not 10, 20% enjoyment. It's like literally like 90% enjoyment versus 10%. Because when I'm being speedy, I barely even notice that I'm tasting this thing and filling up my body.
Exactly. And people sometimes forget, I don't know, it's like it's interesting, like people sometimes forget that applies to their home too. Like someone was like, what about my heart monitor? It's like your heart monitor is included. The things that you have to have in your home are included, but at the same time, you can make your bed every
Right.
morning, right?
Right. Yeah. And for parents, it's like the whole space can be chaotic, but there's still because chaos with kids particularly can be joyful,
Mm-hmm.
but so it doesn't have to be uptight and perfect and you're yelling at the kids all the time like don't touch that. But there's this sense of like, oh, let's clean up together and I know this from my friends, not personally, but like there can be a sense of not being uptight, which I think is kind of what you were saying maybe.
Yeah. So that's the way that I look at feng shui, and I think that might be slightly different than how other people teach it. And this is what I've come to
Mm.
as I'm, a Buddhist practitioner, and this comes from Taoism. This comes from Buddhism. So there is like secularized kind of Western ways to look at feng shui, where it's maybe people think it's like manifest like $1,000, but I don't take it from that
Yeah.
perspective, because I think, you know, maybe you can manifest $1,000 or a girlfriend, but it goes hand in hand. Like, to receive something, there needs to be generosity. You give to. So those, so those, so are like elite, like sometimes we have the tendency to kind of make it so about money or some like making it about gain. And
Yeah.
I really try to show both sides of that and have a more heart-centered approach.
Okay. Okay. So this is a long preamble because we haven't even got to the subject,
I
but I wanted to touch one more time because elephant is wants to be our community wants to be sensitive to issues of cultural appropriation or cultural sharing and appreciation.
Mhm.
So what's the difference in terms of like largely Westerners are on this call, although it's international? How can we don't want to all silo and separate and only have our own culture. That's sort of like the racist worldview. But at the same time, we don't want to we want to be respectful of feng shui and its roots. So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that it's helpful to be culturally appreciative and to appreciate feng shui. And feng shui is just like one type of geomancy, where we're looking at our spaces. All cultures have some form of geomancy and feng shui, and looking at um, how they can best position themselves in their environment. So oftentimes what I look at is like I encourage everyone to not only look at the feng shui perspective, but take foundational principles of that and see how that works in their current local environment, like what's happening right around you, and notice that, and not to just assume it's about like making things look Asian, because that's not really what it's about. There's no style connected to feng shui. And I think also to try to explore where it comes from. And there's a lot of practitioners now that are starting to make their own, they've made their own feng shui, which, I don't know about that, but I don't even know what they're teaching. So I can't really say anything, but
It's like yoga. Everyone has their own like patented,
yeah,
form of yoga. And you're like, yeah, it's good that it's personal, but it feels a little marketing-ish or
yeah, but
something.
it's about just having curiosity about where it comes from and looking a little bit beyond the
Yeah.
surface, and and exploring it more instead of pigeonholing it, I think.
Yeah, it's a little complicated because, I go back with feng shui like 30 years to when I worked for Shambhala Publications in Boston, and I was in the Buddhist community, and feng shui was always part of growing up in the Shambhala Buddhist community. And I remember a lot of traditional feng shui, I mean, you know more about this, but arose from like cemeteries
Mm-hmm.
um, and the way we're approaching it, I think my first feng shui book, which I think I still have and I adore it, was like how to feng shui your cool apartment. It's like totally different, but I feel like it can kind of swing both ways in that way, right?
Well, it's the same with meditation too, right? Like, so someone can say, I'm listening to like this app with this guided meditation, and that doesn't mean that they're it's a great introduction, and so then maybe they end up learning some
Right.
more a different type of more different, they dive more into it, or maybe they don't, and it's okay. But
Yeah.
I think that, also one thing that I've been thinking about too with the cultural appropriation thing a little bit was that is that the interesting thing about feng shui is it really connects us with our space, right, and our location in the land,
Mm,
and where we are physically.
mm,
And in our like modern global world right now, that there, many like, I my family is Korean, but I've never been to Korea. And I like grew up in the US. I grew up in LA, and now I live in New York. And how feng shui really encourages us to start to recreate new rituals for ourselves based on where we are now in our
mm.
world now, the world that we inherited, right? And so instead of just kind of blankly looking at things from like a perspective like this is how it was done,
Yeah,
like how do we look at like how do we apply these principles in a relevant way to where we are right now?
I love that. And yeah, what you just said about not having been to Korea, you know, growing up around in the US, it reminds me of Barack Obama's search for his identity. I don't know if you read, what is it, Dreams of My Father? But,
Yeah.
he had this complicated identity, and he wrestled with that as it when he was young for decades until at some point and that's where we kind of all are at, some
Mm-hmm.
more dramatically than others. But I'm half Jewish and, you know, come from 18 other different countries, and we're all just right here, like you said. So to jump
Mm-hmm.
in finally with all that intro, but it's nice to start a little bit respectfully so we know what we're getting into. But the new year is coming. So can you tell us just about the Eastern or Lunar New Year generally, and the meaning of, the 12, I think it's 12 animals and four, is it four elements or five? Five. So can you tell us about that? And then what year are we going into and when is this?
Sure. So on February 10th, where most like the majority, a lot of the world, a lot of Asia, a lot of our planet celebrates Lunar New Year. And it is usually it's the new moon that's closest to the first day of spring.
Mm,
And the first day of spring on on the lunar solar calendar is February 4th. In any case, it is this year, it changes every year. So this year it's February 10th. And it reminds me of like my grandmother, whose birthday was on the lunar calendar. Every year her birthday was different.
Wow.
And yeah,
Huh.
so it's a celebration though, of it's also called the Spring Festival, and it's a celebration of the spring. And it's also when we celebrate that transition from the 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 previous year to the new year. So we are currently in the year of the rabbit. And sometimes people know about this, like, when we were young, like we would go to the Chinese restaurant and there would be the placemat, right? With all the animals on it. So we're just saying goodbye to the year of the rabbit, and we're welcoming in the year of the dragon. And it's a 12-year cycle, and there's also 5 elements, so it ends up being like a 60-year cycle. But the dragon is the fifth. Wait, dragon. So it's, hold on, let me get my little cheat sheet. So the first animal is the rat, ox, tiger, your tiger, okay, rabbit, and dragon. So dragon is the 5th animal, and tiger is the 3rd, and the rabbit's the 4th. So this is like a time that people really celebrate this transition. And it's very similar to the Western zodiac, actually, because a lot of people don't know that there's an animal for each year in this 12-year cycle, but there's also, those animals also correspond to each month and a day of the month, as well as the hour.
Oh, I didn't know all that. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you get your Chinese astrology done, your 4 pillars, there's 4 pillars, and one of the pillars is your year pillar, but there's also an animal associated with your month of birth, your day of birth, and your hour of birth.
And, I'm not a huge fan of astrology. So how do you view this? For whatever reason, probably because I grew up with it, this doesn't trigger my, like, this is all crazy superstition that means nothing button. So how do we
Well,
relate to this? Is this like relating to the cycles of nature, more or less?
yeah,
Lunar calendar?
absolutely, absolutely. Well, first of all, you're a tiger, so you probably like kind of like, you're like, I'm a tiger, and I'm a dragon, so I'm like, I'm a dragon. I like it.
Totally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're at least we're cool. We're the cool animals,
Yeah.
right?
My
Um,
mom, as she loves to say, and this is the only time I will ever say this out loud, my mom is a cock.
your mom's your mom is the good luck charm this year. You got to hang out
Yeah.
with your lot.
She never gets tired of saying, I'm a cock. She thinks it's really funny.
Is your mom really talkative?
She is. Yeah. I think I'm probably even more talkative, but yeah, when I was a little kid, she knew everyone, talked with everyone. It would drive me crazy because we could never get anywhere.
Yeah. Well, our friend Marsha Shabata, she's also a rooster.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
So
Rooster sounds so much
they're
nicer.
like they're like peacocks. They
Yeah.
like to, yeah.
Yeah.
But so, okay, so speaking of that, like, kind of energy, so what it is like these animals were selected to represent different energies that happen. And one doesn't have to think like, oh, I'm not, I have nothing to do with this animal. You don't even have to look at it that
Right.
way, but it could be looked at like as 12 animals kind of represent like all the different archetypes of different energies that exist in the world, and how we can become more in harmony with that. And there is, yes, like cycles of nature, like the animals also actually have seasonal connections and elemental connections, and each year has an elemental connection. So 2024 is not only the year of the dragon, but it's a year of it's wood element. So that's another aspect of the chi, that the life force energy that's coming in this year. And we're leaving like the water rabbit. So I mean, everyone here can understand, and this is why the ancient Chinese put these animal archetypes with these energies. If I say rabbit and I say dragon, you already, everyone listening already has a sense of those two different energies, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's not, it's intuitive. It touches we know,
And
as humans, we know.
and same with water and versus wood.
Water versus wood. Yeah. Like, well, how does like a deep ocean feel versus, or a rushing river feel, or rain feel versus um, the feeling of a huge evergreen tree, or walking through a bamboo forest? Like, those have very different feelings, heart feeling to it. And so that gives you some sense
And then the combo
of
of the animal and the element have a different feeling than just the animal. Like dragon on its own sounds pretty fierce and intense and powerful, but with wood, it feels a little gentler. Is that right, or is that wrong?
It could be. Well, wood element is also wood element is very active, actually. Wood element is very active. It's like the energy of spring, and it's very energetic, and it has the color green associated, and it's about things moving and action and growth and activity. So it does give the sense of activity, but it's not as, like, say, dynamic as fire,
Or
right?
metal would sound kind of intense to me.
Yeah, metal's a little rigid. So,
Yeah.
metal's like a sword, right? So
Right.
and like the other elements are water. Water is kind of dark
Right.
and downward, and earth is much more stable and soothing. So there's different qualities to these elements that we all inherently understand. And then one interesting thing about the dragon too, and you growing up around this, you probably have a more nuanced understanding of the dragon, but there is like a difference between the Eastern dragon and the Western dragon. So like, I often talk about like the Western dragon is something like the Game of Thrones, like super like like intense, like fire breathing, evil, like kind of like having a negative, kind of dangerous feeling towards it. Whereas the Eastern dragon is much more benevolent, and both fly, both are mythical, but the Eastern dragon actually doesn't have a fire. Fire doesn't like blow fire out, but they bring water. So
they're up there in the, like, they create
the rain.
the clouds or the storms or whatever, the
Yeah,
rainfall.
they're much more benevolent. So, and actually the story goes, because there's like a story that goes along with like the whole order of the Chinese animal, or the 12 animals. And like, you would think that the mythical dragon that flies would have come in first place, right? But the story goes that the dragon was like on its way to save a village by bringing water that was in a village that was in drought, and then saw the rabbit that couldn't cross the river. So like blew some, like blew some wind so that the rabbit could get on a little piece of wood to cross the river. So the rabbit came in fourth, and then the dragon came in fifth. So the dragon's really thought as, a rainmaker, which is very important in older societies, where even now what we understand, water is a very valuable resource. So water is so important. So the dragon brings water, is very benevolent, and also like they're magnificent. They fly. They're the only mythical creature. So that's another thing. Like in the whole system, it's the only mythical creature.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah, the dragon feels very unique and special, and in the 12th. So there was just a question, and we have a bunch of articles actually on elephant if you search for the Eastern or Chinese or Tibetan New Year that show you which animal and which element you are. A viewer just asked. But how do people, you can look it up, I guess, and you're going to write an article, I think, about this, but how do people find out what animal and what element they're associated with?
That's a great question. So I'm gonna write an article that we're gonna post up.
And we'll link to it in the videos. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's actually, there's a nuance that a lot of people don't know about this somehow, but because the transition happens around February 3rd or 4th, if you're born in between January 1st and February 4th, you're the year prior. So like say you're 1970, you would be the animal associated with 1969, the year prior,
Right.
because the transition happens on or around February 4th.
Right. That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah. But the key is that the way that you do it, it's a simple internet search. You would just I would just put in 1970 Chinese zodiac animal, and then it'll tell you, and it'll tell you the element and the animal connected to your year of birth. But if you're born in January, I would search the year prior, or you could look up a calculator, a Chinese zodiac calculator that could give you give you more information as well.
Yeah, or the best answer might be you have to go to one of those Chinese restaurants and find one of those great placemats.
Do they even have those anymore?
I hope so. They were so classic and great.
Thanks for listening. Hope you're getting a lot out of it. The full conversation is on our indie platform that supports and continues our work, elephantjournal.com/videos. You can subscribe, listen, watch, and participate there. And when you do so, you'll keep these mindful videos and podcasts going. elephantjournal.com/videos. May it be of benefit.